All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Jay. I'm Jay Lyman with Seattle Public Library. So I hope we can have some fun here this evening, as well as learn some stuff. So I just as a short disclaimer, I do have pictures of my dogs in this presentation. So be watching for those because they're coming up, and I'm always proud to show my pictures of my puppies. So anyway, uh, I hope we can have some fun tonight because I certainly enjoy this topic that we're going to explore together, which is, how do I research and find data that's going to support my business idea? And you can see I've got slides here. We'll go through these slides and all that kind of thing, but those are so that I can share those pictures of my puppies and to make sure I don't forget something, or so we don't go too far off track. But I'm willing to go off track if you have questions that take us in a different direction too. So just know that like the slides are there to help guide the conversation, but I hope this is interactive and you have questions for me throughout this. And I'm sure that Xenia and Sydney will keep me on track for time and everything too. So um, with that, I'll introduce myself too, and be thinking about this, like what questions at the very beginning you have as I'm talking here too, so we can make sure we get like any questions that you brought with you today, get those on the table so I can make sure I incorporate those. So think about that. So I'm a librarian with Seattle Public Library. I've been doing this work of supporting entrepreneurs since about 2009. Before that, I worked at an accounting firm where I was also doing market research and learned a lot of skills. But I'll tell you, I learned so much more from the librarians that I got to that mentored me, that have been doing this work old school with like card catalogs and old indexes, for 30 years. So I got to learn their skills and how they did it. But then let's face it, the world has changed and there's new ways of doing this kind of market research. So I got to sort of like live in both of those worlds, and I'm happy to share what I've learned throughout. Let's see, so that's me. I'm a librarian, help people find the information that you need to succeed in business. And I guess I'll just leave that there. So what questions did you bring with you today to make sure that I answer while we're in our time together? Anybody have any? It's okay if you don't have any burning questions too.
I do, Jay. It's a small question, but I'm curious if I wanted to come in and use the librarian for some research, one-on-one. Is that something that can happen? Do I need to schedule an appointment, or is it just come in and just grab them if they're available?
I love that question. Thank you. That's like the softball. Yes. How do we get more help if what I share with you is convincing today? We'll cover that. And there's some different ways that we can help, and we're gonna walk through that. So thank you for that question. I see another one down here. Can we access academic journals via the library? It depends. So some, I'll cover some. I love, we'll go down that and explore that, but it really depends on the specific academic journal that you're wanting, or set of journals that you're really trying to find. The more valuable ones, sometimes we don't have, but sometimes we do. You never know. So. Oh, and here's another one. How do you find grants for nonprofits? Okay, let me make sure I make a note for that one as well too, so so I don't forget to explain that one too. We can dive off into some grant seeking databases that the library offers, and that can be an opportunity to tie back to that first question that that came up too, of like, how do I get more help? Because we'll get to it in a minute of like how we get to help, but the library helps both nonprofits seeking grants and for-profits that are looking for market research which often ties to some sort of grant or funding resource too. Keep them coming. What else you got? What other questions? Okay, here we go. Too nebulous, but a huge portion of market research is making assumptions about which portion of a community is going to be our market. What are some of the best guides for determining those shares? I.e., if a tourist population is this, expect Y to make a purchase in the town. Yes, this is great. This dives into some specifics around some of the creative ways of. I'll answer that briefly, and let's go down an example for that a little bit later here in our time together. The brief answer is, I think using using creativity to look for data can be a really big way of then how to strategize how to use that data. So that creative search can help us identify what exists so that we can then kind of tie that back to, those percentages that you're mentioning there. I think it'll make more sense if I do that in real time. So let's do that. And then I see a question about copyright, and especially when you're using quotes or images or websites. Awesome question. I love that too. And I'm going to cover not a resource that librarians can help with, but we have a service where we bring attorneys who have expertise in intellectual property to library events. In fact, we did one this afternoon. And so an attorney from Microsoft came and volunteered their time for 2 hours. We did 4 sessions back to back, 30 minutes. And you can ask questions like that about how do I figure that part of it out? And they can be very helpful. They can't do the work for you because it's pro bono. So they have to stay in that pro bono kind of framework. But they sure can help in a lot of ways. Okay, we've been doing some kind of high level. These are great. I love these questions, and I hope I've sort of done a little bit of a teaser for each one of them. And accessing statistical studies already done. Yes, that's exactly what we're the kind of things that we're looking for in these kind of searches. Okay, well let's start marching through some of the stuff here, because I think it'll answer some of your questions, especially some of those first questions that came up here. And so to sort of speak to this really goes to that first question that let's see, who was it that asked about? It was Natalie, I think. So how do we get help? How do we get one-on-one help? So we have a set of business information appointments that you can book, which is one-on-one time with myself or 9 of my colleagues who are all librarians. They are all trained in market research because I trained them each myself. And so they are all skilled at helping you find data. And if they in the moment can't find it, or if I in the moment can't find it, we also we pool our resources, we talk to each other, and so that is another strength of our team, is that we work together when we find challenging kinds of questions. So you can book these one-on-one appointments. I'll share these slides afterwards, so you can click on this live link to the appointment booking page. At the very moment, there are few appointments there. We're working on adding some more. So if you don't find a time, or you don't find an appointment that works for you, that's where you can email me, and I'll send you probably my Calendly link, or even here's 5 times that work for me, and we can schedule some time, because I kind of consider myself like a floater. So if the times that my colleagues have to offer don't work for you, I'll figure out something, and we'll work out some time that we can help you out with this. Because I know you're all working on projects that would this would probably be valuable for. So my email's there. You can also use the team email there, the L2B, l2b@spl.org. That's me and my colleagues. So, if I'm out of the office that day or something, one of my other colleagues might reply, like Lindy or Katie or somebody else that's on the team might go, oh, here's an answer, or here's how you can find this time. We're going to talk more about the tools. We're going to go into a lot of those tools. The other note, there's a phone number up there. Just email me. That's probably the best. If you need to talk to somebody on the phone, you can call there. But we're in and out of the office, and we're in these appointments and things, so it's probably best to email us anyway. I don't know why my slide keeps going back, but it does. So we'll talk more about tools. I mentioned the consults, but we also have workshops and things that are coming up. So most of our workshops that are on the horizon are on legal topics, although we're going to have more workshops throughout the year by amazing presenters on marketing and all kinds of things. So stay tuned for those, and that business calendar of events has lots of them there. Any questions on like how you get in touch with us, how all that works? Does that all make sense? Do you have?
Can folks outside Seattle also use the services?
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. So libraries are local, but all those services are available to you wherever you are. So we were talking about the legal consults just a minute ago, and the business information appointments. I was actually tallying up some of that for some detail, and I found like people that were physically located in Florida that had come to our events, people that were in California, and many people in various parts of King and Pierce counties and Snohomish counties. So all of these services that I'm talking about are free, and all of them are open to anyone who would like them. So if you're outside of the city of Seattle or outside of King County, don't worry, because you can still come to our appointments, come to our consults. Now, I will say, that said, one thing that it does matter, where you are, is when it comes to and where that libraries are local, plays a role when it comes to like getting into the tools themselves and accessing the tools themselves. Libraries have licensing agreements with these database providers, and many of these databases are things we subscribe to on your behalf. So for that, you do need to have a library card, but we have these reciprocal agreements between library systems. So you can get a library card if you're in King County at the Seattle Public Library, if you're in Pierce County, if you're in Snohomish County, if you're in Kitsap County. Now there's a limit to how far that goes, those reciprocal agreements. But let's say you're further abroad than even that. Maybe you're out in Winthrop or something. You can actually, in that case, we don't want to we don't want you to have to buy something. But if you don't have that reciprocal agreement, maybe you don't have that local access from your local library. If you're in the state of Washington, you can buy a public library card from either Seattle Public Library or Spokane Public Library, or others too. But I would look at Spokane, because they have actually the best set of data, and it's actually cheaper than the Seattle Public Library. So you get everything, all the data that you would need, all the data that we have access to, you would get through there, and for less. So just a shout out to Spokane for the amazing support that they offer. Is there anybody that lives outside of Pierce, Snohomish, King, or Kitsap counties, or where's Olympia? That's in, let's see, Clallam County. Okay, so yours is a little bit further abroad. Whatcom County, okay. Anybody else? Okanagan, okay, yep.
Hey, Jay, can they still do a consult with you even if they are not in the, so the only thing they can't access is maybe a couple of the data sets?
That's right, yeah. And what we're talking about there, so they can still do the consults. In fact, during the consult, we'll try to get as much data to you as possible. So we'll do some of that searching, send you the reports, email you the stuff that you need. But what we're talking about is like after all that, if you're trying to still do research on your own, want to access some of those similar reports, reconfigure the query or whatever, trying to get you some access to do that part of it. So you're outside of the consults, but you can do the consultations and legal consultations, all that. That's a great question. Yeah, for Clallam, Whatcom, and Okanagan, those are 3 areas that might be beyond that reciprocal agreement. Although for Okanagan, I wonder if you might have a reciprocal agreement somewhere with Spokane directly. So explore that. Whatcom, I think you might be, well, you might have some tools directly that you can access through Whatcom County libraries. So you might be surprised at what your library has to offer. And then also, we haven't talked about this, but sometimes academic libraries will let you walk in the door and use some of the tools that they offer just directly there too. Yeah, unless you're a student or a faculty member, you might not have that remote access, but you could go in the door at Western Washington University or something and see what they could provide that way too. And also, another option, Small Business Development Centers offers some access to some academic resources through their advisors. So they have a relationship with a university library to be able to offer some of that too. But then, worst case scenario, buying a library card, if you don't qualify under all those other things, still can't get it. We're talking $65, for a year for a Spokane Public Library card. I think it's $85 for Seattle or something. So we like to give things out for free because that's what we're all about. but those licensing agreements are what really that ties us to. So we promise to these database vendors that I'm going to share with you that we're going to offer these to our card holders, and here's how that all works. And so hopefully that makes sense. Other questions on this, on how to get a library card, how to get access? Yeah, don't let it stop you from booking time with us, because we'll help anyway. Okay, and we started talking a little bit about this, but most of what we're talking about here are things that are databases that are electronic. But every now and again, I was walking through the library, I found some some resources that are relevant, 2022, and still published in print. So there's a few things out there that might be a print kind of resource, but often those are things that are like, I need these 3 pages. I've been known to PDF those for people and email them. So, and my colleagues can do that kind of thing too. So if we run into that, like we do what we can there as well. So let's back away from the how do I access things and start to talk about some market research more generally. Like, what are the kinds of questions that people ask us over and over again in different ways? So every market is different, but the types of questions people ask about markets tend to be similar. And so when I get stuck and I'm trying to figure out how am I going to answer this tough question, I try to tie it back to these 3 questions. The 4th one is sort of like a different type of thing, but who's my competitor, client, or partner? Like what other companies exist in this market or this geography? Who's my customer for this service or this product? So that's demographics, lifestyle kinds of information. How much money do people spend on different products or services? Those kind of things. And that's if households are your customer. Then backing away to the other type of customer, business to business, then it's a very different type of data set, because then we're not talking about households, we're talking about businesses. And then it's more about that top one, information about other companies as clients, and in that respect. And then market trends. I loved the comment or the question about accessing statistical studies that are already done. That's typically what we're looking for, in these market trend kind of questions. Sometimes we're finding them in market research reports on the industry, and sometimes you have to be back up to like the closest industry, and then wow, we open up that report, and then there's the specific statistical data point that we were looking for. Industry norms are another thing of like, what do companies in this area typically spend on advertising or on their officer compensation, those kind of things, so you can benchmark against other companies in the industry. And forecasts are important too, of like how, what does the five-year trend look like for this industry. And we'll talk more about each of these things. And then the fourth one up there on the list of general guidebooks and guides, sometimes people are just looking for like that overview kind of read. I want to learn about social media marketing, or learn about the latest and greatest on this. And the people who are buying for the library buy often in multiple formats. They might buy an electronic book, a print resource, and a e-audio book of those kinds of things, and they're trying to keep the collection up to date and as diverse as possible when it comes to these kind of general guidebooks and handbooks. Okay, I'll pause there. Is there any questions on these, or is there another type of information that you're not seeing that on my list here? Did I miss anything? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. And here's my cute puppy. Here's Socks. Her name is Socks. Socks is a Boston Terrier Pug mix. This is her as a tiny puppy when she was, I think it was like her first day in our home. Now, this was 10 years ago. So now Socks, like I has a gray muzzle, and now there's a different a younger dog that's also part of our house, Junebug. I think there's a picture of her as a puppy in a minute, but Socks now has a friend. So here's an example of a market trend. In 2014, I went out and found this data point that says that Americans are spending $350 million on costumes to dress up our pets. That's a lot of money. So this is not to keep them warm. This is for Halloween. Then in 2021, I found a survey, same survey that was, or same data source. Survey said that 1 out of 5 people that celebrate Halloween were going to dress their pets up. And then in 22, I found another data point, same data source, that said that pet spending was expected to reach $710 million. Wow. So look at that, at first glance, like all those things to me say, yes, this thing is going to work. Like if I'm starting a pet costume business, all those things say, yes, do it. Let's go ahead with this. People are spending money on this product. But look at the subtle differences in each one of these three. They were all from the National Retail Federation. But this first one is usually the way I want that formatted, market size. I want to see what's the size of my market, for this product. The second one, that's useful. So second time, I was looking for this. I was looking for the exact same data point. But they didn't have that for free. They were willing to sell that to me at some cost, and that one wasn't in the library's databases. But the second point, if I knew how many people celebrate Halloween, and I knew how much money people spent on that, I might be able to convert that 1 out of 5 people that celebrate Halloween into something that looks like a market size. I'm still not getting the exact data point I want, but I'm saying this just to illustrate that sometimes data doesn't live in the form that we expect it to, and we can still get data that's relevant and will be helpful if we're willing to entertain some differences and like what I'm showing up here on the screen. That last one seems like the most perfect because it's up to date and all that. But if you look carefully, that's pet spending, not pet spending on costumes like we have up at the top. Costumes are some percentage of that, but I don't know what percentage. Is that, does that take me to 510? Is it 400? I don't know. But so you see what I'm saying? Like sometimes you have to, when we're doing market research, sometimes we have to back up to larger industries or step to the side or something to get to something that we're looking for. And I just wanted to prepare you for that, because this is one example, but I run into that over and over again in different contexts of like, this is what I'm looking for, but like if I jump to the side, I find something that still is relevant, but it's not it wasn't the report I exactly wanted. And then here's Junebug and socks. And then another cool part of that 2022 NRF, National Retail Federation survey, is that it lists out, you know, types of costumes. And so I've been watching hot dogs and bats creep up on pumpkins, and then the bumblebees and witches are like a new thing over the last couple of years. So I do track this every year for fun, because it's a fun part of my presentation. And then here's Socks in her Darth Vader hoodie. And I have Socks in here so that we can all like, you know, see her today. But I also want to like pose this, you know, question here of like, you know, if in this, you know, situation, who's the customer? Is it me? Kinda, like I spent the money. Is it Socks? No, Socks is not the customer here. Socks didn't buy it, and she's not super happy about the Darth Vader hoodie at this moment in time, although it's grown on her and she does, it keeps her warm, and Junebug sometimes wears it too. But so when we're talking about that ideal customer, it's like, you know, pet owner, you know, and also like, you know, I wouldn't have bought that if I didn't have kids, and some the kids were, you know, an influence on me. So thinking about all those factors as we're thinking about that market research. Okay. Any questions so far? We're going to dive into some specific details and some demographic tools to take us further, but I wanted to sort of talk about more generally about market research too. And this also is another way to illustrate, another way to talk about what I was talking about, is that sometimes we need to find those different data sources that all point at viability. So they might not all be combining to be one data point, but one data point that says, yes, there's customers that buy pet products. Yes, there's a trend that more people are going to be, you know, spending money because X, Y, or Z. Yeah, there's enough, you know, room in the competitive landscape that we're going to be successful and all those kind of things. So those are all things that I think about when I'm trying to tell that data story of viability. And then another element that I like to think about is these, you know, and another way to think about that, like how do it's actually kind of a systematic approach to research is, you know, when it comes to business research, we have industries which are like really well defined. They're defined. I don't know if are NAICS codes familiar to folks here? Is that a new thing for anybody? Or is that something that's everybody knows?
I'd say it's worth explaining. I think a lot of even the small businesses and SGBN are still unfamiliar with the term.
Okay, cool. Well, let's talk about those. So NAICS codes, you know, if you think about an old phone book, you know, you open up an old yellow pages, you know, and you're like paging through and you're going through and like, okay, here's the little section on gyms. Here's the restaurants, here's the like grocery stores. Each of those little headers at the top, grocery store or gym, those things, those are NAICS codes. So they're just really the defined industries that exist. Those are defined by the federal government. as part of the economic census. So every 5 years, they go out and they update those codes so that we have these defined industries. And then the publishers of information, business information, they typically use those codes to identify, their industry reports. So they tend to be at those kinds of reports tend to be written at those industry levels, which is great. Yeah, NAICS is how that is. So so you have it right, NAICS or NAICS or NAICS or something. I've heard it said a lot of different ways. So yes, thanks Sydney for putting the NAICS search out there. So if you know your NAICS code, it can be a shortcut to understanding, how data is, where data might live. Not always. Sometimes we can go direct to it in a report or something else like that. But knowing those codes is valuable. And so the census, defines that NAICS.com is a good one too. But if you think about our pet product example, the code is 453910, and then they call it pet and pet supply stores. So that's the closest code that we have for that. And many databases are like defining and organizing information in this way. But going back to my last slide, there are also markets, and if we think about our pet costumes would be a market as part of the larger pet and pet supply industry. So if we think about it in that way, that you have markets which are like pretty nebulous and not well defined. They exist. Like certainly there's a lot of people buying these pet costumes. That's a market, but that is part of this larger industry of pet and pet supply stores. I wish they were like broken down in much more specific ways than because I think it's valuable, but that's how it is. Yeah, they don't, in my opinion, they don't break those down to the granular level that we often want. I would like pet costumes, and I would like more specific things, but often we have to back up to the larger industry, find the industry, and then within that report we might find the more specific data we're looking for. Does this make sense? You got markets and industries. Okay, and then what we're talking about, like was mentioned earlier on, we're talking about statistical things and reports and surveys and things that have already been done. But there's this other way of doing market research, which is going out and asking people. And sometimes that's primary research. Sometimes doing the secondary research of finding what's already been done can be valuable ahead of that, so that you can know what questions to ask. So, but sometimes you do have to do surveys or interviews or focus groups to find more data that you need. So I just want to put that out there of like, when we're stuck, sometimes you might have to start asking potential customers. Is my audio okay? I'm seeing a comment there that breaking up. Am I good? Okay, maybe there's different connections too. All right, so we can. How are we doing with time? Are we on track?
You are good to go. It is 5:39, and you said that you'd want until about 6:30. So you have about 50 more minutes.
All right. Well, we could break out into and break into some of these databases if you'd like to see some of them in action. This one might be one that why don't we go through these top databases, and then we could break back and kind of see the actual searches, if that is helpful. We could even take an example through there. so let's do that. Let's talk about some of these, generally, and then we could come back to some, especially like this one, or and demographics now might be useful databases to see the actual searches, and I'll change my share for that. But this one called Data Axle is a good go-to whenever we're trying to find companies. We're trying to find the names of companies in a specific industry. It does sometimes break down by market. So this is one that's nice that you can get to some more specific things. But at the end of the day, you can, like, it produces a list of companies by geography and by type of business, basically. We can cut it in all kinds of different ways. So we could say, like here's, here's the results of pet supply companies in Seattle. This is just a snapshot of some. But we could have said, like, the largest pet supply stores, or the smallest, those that have 1 to 4 employees, all those kind of things. So information about other companies. And let's see. The question, how are major companies related to the US government, like BSNF? How are they subsidized and how are they incentivized? That's a great question. Let's take that one. I've got a different resource that would do that. This particular one would give us the names of companies like BSNF and what, how they're organized and like who the parent company and all that is. But it's not going to show us relationships and contracts. But I do have another database that could give us some clues in that way. So that's a great question. And if we don't get to that one in all the detail, bring it to me in one of those, like, market, one of those one-on-ones, and we'll dig further. But I do have a database I'll point out for that. Demographics now. So this is a second one I'll share about. So if your customer, or your potential customer, is a household, as opposed to a business, demographics now is your best friend. So this can tell you all kinds of stuff about households, people, individuals, numbers of people who live in an area, how much money they spend on different things. So take a look at what we're looking at on the screen. We're seeing the amount of money households who live in the Central District of Seattle spend on brunch versus national trends. It's way different. So, $299 nationally is the national average for brunch. Brunch away from home, not like me making pancakes at home. Seattle in general, $500, but people who live in the Central District are spending $518. That's higher than Mercer Island. So, and if we looked at, I don't have it on this screen, but if we looked at income level, my guess is that Mercer Island, actually, income per capita is even higher than Central District, but they're spending less on brunch than that. So these are the kind of expenditures are one of those categories that we can find in demographics now, but it has a ton of other different kinds of categories. Another kind of information that you can get from demographics now is our lifestyle segments. So if you look over on the left-hand side, I've got a little screen capture of some lifestyle segments. So this is a lifestyle segmentation model, or a psychographic segmentation, are two different ways that people refer to these. So if you look at, like, there, you've got the flourishing families. Within that, we have across the ages, babies and bliss, family friend. What do those even mean? So the one B10 there, cosmopolitan achievers, I've pulled out some data points from the report on them that talks about some, like, key factors, key features. They tend to be bilingual, soccer fans, 2 family properties. Down here on the channel preferences, this is our best ways to reach this lifestyle segment. And the little TV means TV, but that's going to also include, like, YouTube and streaming video. The little radio looking thing over there is That's radio, but also podcast and things. We've got email marketing, so social media, and then text messages. For this group, snail mail, not so much. Also radio and all things audio, podcasting and things, not so much. But all three of those, or all four of those others, are pretty good options for reaching this group. And if we look at this group in Seattle, Washington State, and nationally, you can get some numbers of people, numbers of this group that live in an area. And the numbers really do change by geography. So if we looked at another like Bellingham or someplace else, the numbers are going to shift quite drastically, and those lifestyles will shift and those channel preferences will shift. So that's how you can really start to get at, like, okay, this is my target audience in this geography, and then we can start to dig in more. This is just like a couple of data points, but there's like 5 pages of detail about this one lifestyle segment. Does this make sense so far? Does the demographics now detail?
Yeah, I think there's a comment in the chat that may be worth bringing out now. Would it be helpful if I read that out loud, or is that in front of you?
I got it. So taking an educated guess of whether pet costumes would be a marketable product in a low-income area. What's our justification for charging, and would we need to do, what would we need for a USA handmade pet costume, knowing it's going to cost more than a factory-made one imported? It's a lot more than knowing just USA market size for pet costumes as a lump, but I'm not sure where to break it all down by area, subcategory, and all that. Yes. So why don't we, when we drop back to demo this database, I think we'll have time. Let's do that. We'll go through pet costumes, and I'll show you how to use demographics now to get at pet expenditures, and then we'll talk a little bit about pricing. Pricing is tricky, and there's two things to think about, like or two approaches to pricing, and it's a strategy. It's not a formula. There's a lot to it, but and the two approaches are top down and bottom up. Top down, I think, would be like figuring out what competitors are charging for a thing, and then like finding like something that the market will bear. Bottom up, what does it cost me to do all the things that I need to do to produce this product, the cost of goods sold, and then finding a price that works, so you're not pricing yourself right out of business, because that can happen. So finding someplace in the middle of those two is a pricing. That's why it's that strategy piece. But from the data perspective, we can certainly look at stuff like this, but then also look at like incomes and that kind of thing. So maybe we'll look at like, where are people spending more on pet supplies, and then we could back into some other pieces there. And I'm not sure what the question, library version complete. So Gemma, if you want to share more about your question there too.
I just opened it on the computer, but it looks different.
For the demographics now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can see in the picture you have, it says library edition.
Yes. Let's start at the library one, and we'll do that. Let's just go through 2 more things, and then we're going to drop back and do some searching in demographics now, so you can see it in live action. But before we did that, like, I just wanted to mention, actually, just 2 more things. These first research industry reports, when it comes to that third category, so we had like, who's my customer, or who's my customer, who's my competition, and then the trends piece. This one for trends is one of my first go-tos, this first research industry reports. why it's my first go-to is that they tend to be done every quarter, so we can get a nice fresh snapshot of what's going on in the industry, and they have a lot of data about what's happening in the industry. And we might even find a trend that refers to what we're looking for. Whoops, like this: the humanization of pets has influenced pet care industry strategies. Whoops. So it's talking about, like, the more we treat our pets as children or family members, the more money we spend on them. And that, that speaks to pet costumes, and if you ask me. So, like, that little trend is something to think about and to call out. Okay, so I'm going to drop out of this set of slides, and we'll do some searching in demographics now, and I'll show you what that looks like. I'm going to stop my share. And I'm starting a new one. Let me know if you can see the library's webpage now. Okay, cool. So what you're going to do, go to our programs and services, business and nonprofit. And then here on this page, this is your one-stop shopping to all that stuff I was talking about. Business information appointments are right here. Legal consults, you can do the business information appointments. If there was a question about grant searching, for that, do the nonprofit information appointment, because that's the three of us that have access to the grant seeking tools for nonprofits. And if you're a for-profit, you can also do that too. We can do both. We can do both of those. And then the legal consults are here. This is where that question about copyright. We have April 3rd, we have corporate law consults. That's more of like incorporation, legal entity, that kind of thing. But April 11th, intellectual property. We have experts on intellectual property, and you can take, have 30 minutes of their time. So I wanted to diverge from that part of it just for a moment. And then coming back to that main page here, business research tools. And here's where all those tools live. So here's Data Axle, here's Demographics Now. There's this one, ABI Inform, that has the first research reports that I was showing you. And then this one is another one. My next favorite is Business Insights Global. And when we're talking about large companies and finding information about their contracts and those kind of things and their relationships and things, this would be my hunch is that this might be the tool that has data for us. But again, if you're not, you go in there and you're not finding what you're looking for, let us help you. We'll walk through that with you, and there might be a different tool that we end up coming up with. But my hunch for bigger companies and like more detail about them, Business Insights Global tends to be my go-to for that. But we were talking about Demographics Now, so let's go back there to that. So I'm going to click on Demographics Now. I'm outside the library, so it's not letting me in right off. So I'm putting, this is where we were talking about like having a library card. So I type my library card and my PIN number in there. Takes a second for it to authenticate. And then I'm in Demographics Now. Did it update for all of you? Can you see Demographics Now on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. And Gemma, does it look different now than what it did before? Does my version look different than where you got?
It looks a bit different than what I got on my computer. I don't know where I am.
Okay, so so this is the first when I first log into Demographics Now using my library card, from my Seattle Public Library card, I'm able to get into this Demographics Now. If you're using like a Snohomish County card, which also has this database, or another library, start at your home library where you have the card, and then log in from there, because it's based, your card will know like, oh, this is a Seattle Public Library card user, and so then they're authenticating against gets that. So that's how you get in. If you get stuck, I'm happy to help with that too, and my colleagues know how to help navigate that too. So let's do a search here. So one of the first ways that I can search this is by saying the geography I want. So if I was doing Seattle, I just type it in, and I got different options. Seattle as a place, Seattle as a DMA. So I'm going to go with the top one there, because that's probably the geography I want. I can compare. So I'm going to go to my location options, go to geography list, and let's compare that to counties. So I'm going to compare to Washington and King. So now I have Seattle and King County, Washington. Okay. I'm going to add another thing here too. So I'm going to add zip codes by county. And then I'm browsing to the county that I want. So Washington. And then let's do Clallam County, Clallam Bay. And then let's also do King. And we'll do this zip code in Auburn. So we've got Seattle, King County, a zip code in Clallam Bay, and a zip code in Auburn. Very different geographies. So we click on done. Now I can go to demographics, this tab right here in the center, and then I can start running reports. First report I might run, if we're thinking about this pet supply company, is the complete demographic comparison report. Click run report, still churning away for me. Okay, now we have our population. So we can see that zip code in Auburn has 47,000 people. The zip code in Clallam Bay, 1,400 people. Seattle, 750,000, and then King County's 2.3 million people, not dollars. Then we could see by household, so we can immediately start to see that how many part of the things, census data. But demographics now uses this census data and brings it up to current. Because if we go out to the census, you'll be getting these like American Community Survey updates. But many of these other expenditures and things, like they're not as current as what you find here. So this is them using statistical math to bring it right up to current, and then rolling it out into geographies we want to know about. Okay, so then by age. So if kids, thinking about that pet costume, kids are important. So 5 to 14 years old. Okay, so looks like that area in Auburn has more kids than the other areas. They also have, let's see, if we keep going down here, we can look at areas of race and ethnicity. We can look at, do people own their own home? We can see, but what I was looking for was income. So here's our household income for each of those geographies. So we can really compare do people have disposable income that they're going to spend on pet supplies. We'll get to the actual expenditure in a minute. But this one answers that like general question of like, how much money do people on average or by median earn in each of those areas? Make sense so far? So then I'm going to scroll down here to this consumer expenditure comparison report. And you can see there's some other canned reports for like automotive, for, you know, food and beverage, for home furnishings. Each of those is sort of like, you know, set up and canned report for each of those kinds of things. There's other data in here that aren't included in each of those reports. And sometimes it can be confusing of which one to look in. So that's another place for us to help. So, but I happen to know that this one, or not this one, the consumer expenditure comparison report, this one has pet supplies in it. So I'm going to wait for that to run. I go down here to, here it is, pet supplies, purchase, and medicine. So you can see now for all this, we have like number of households, we have the number of kids in each of those geographies, and now we have we have income for each of those geographies, and now we've got how much money each of those spends on pet supplies. So Seattle in general spends more than these other geographies. That's not always the case. That like you know, and in this case, here's the income level. They put it in here too. Average household expenditures, medium household income. In this case, Seattle and King County are making about the same amount of money by median income. And for pet supplies, Seattle's spending quite a bit more. So even though like there's not a, so there's more spending in Seattle than countywide on this product, even though countywide and Seattle income is about the same. So there really is some differences to take a look at there. And these are the kind of like insights. So I'd be pulling, for doing this market research, I'd be pulling each of these reports, pulling these data points into a, you know, like, okay, here, and remember that star in the center and all those data points pointing. That's how I'm approaching, you know, this.
Hey Jay, did you deliberately pick Clallam Bay because there's a correctional facility there?
No, because somebody said Clallam in the chat.
Oh, well, if you look at the population, it's skewed because there's a correctional facility there.
Yeah, I didn't know that, and that kind of insight, you know, also is important to have. Like some of these geographies, it's like, you know, oh wow, there's low income and there's low spending, but then I start to look at the specific. Oh, it's because most of that is an airport. You know, so there's nobody living there. You know, so that those kind of things, or like, you know, if we look at the area around UW, you know, like, wow, there's a very low amount of spending. Well, it's because they're students, and you know that they're listed in the household of wherever they live, not you know, in that geography. So yes. Is the interpolation method made public so we can access or assess reliability at all? Yeah, I can share like where this data comes from. So what we're looking at here for these data points right here is it comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics does these they do these surveys of expenditures, how much money people spend on different products and services. And then, so they roll those out on an ongoing basis. You can go out to that one directly, but I don't recommend it, because if you've ever tried to do that, which I have many times, it's confusing. The interface is really like this one has some, you know, like there's some moving parts and things, but boy, the BLS consumer expenditure survey directly is way harder for me to search. Maybe others are used to it, but this makes it much more easy to use. Now, in terms of like, how does Demographics Now take what they get there and then update it to this? They don't share that algorithm because that's their secret sauce. But you know, they don't. And the same with the last report. The last report was, well, we saw the expenditure, and then we saw this stuff comes from census data, American Community Survey, and those. The data is really similar. Like, you know, if you look at American Community Survey, yeah, it's population of Seattle is about 750,000 people. But the same thing, I find this interface easier to use, and they bring it up to what we think is current. So does that help with how they make it possible?
Thank you. That was my question. And I think it's useful to know that, of course, federal data are supposed to be available to all for free. And it's useful to know that Demographics Now is charging for access because of a modification. It's a bit concerning to me that they don't make that modification public, but of course that is, like you say, that's why they're offering the private service. So I think for what we're doing for market, it's not, it doesn't matter that we're not working with the ideal. So thank you.
Yeah. And, and there are times when I go straight back to the census and want the that specific detail. And if I did want that, or look at historical ones, you can actually look at those historical data populations right here in the tool. So they at least provide you with that too. And, and data.census.gov isn't, for population kind of data, it's not that hard to navigate. It's when we start to use that to combine data points, to start to get at some of this, then it becomes confusing. I did some of that work this weekend. I spent about 4 hours working on a project on behalf of somebody. So that was a lot of time, but I got there. But also got there with 2019 data and 2017 data. So we have to live with either well, we can go with the last collected, or we can go with this other company that's estimated, and their estimates bring it up to what they think is current. So those are the tensions that we work within. If that makes sense. And then this other type of data. So I'm glad you're bringing up, well, where does the data come from? Always ask that question. If I don't ask it, do bring that up, because it's an important one. But this one called Mosaic, these are those lifestyle segments that we were looking at. So we've still got our King, Seattle, Column Bay, and Auburn. And here's these lifestyle groupings. So Auburn has this across the ages group. 19% of that zip code in Auburn is this across the ages. Okay, so I click on that, and here they are. So these are rooted in suburbs, multi-generational household, fitness club members, outdoor hobbies. These are some top points, but don't get stuck there, because if you really want to dig into the details, yes, head of the households tends to be 50 to 65. But if we go down here, we realize that, oh, wow, that's 43%, but there's an additional 20% that are 36 to 45. That's that multi-generational. So that you have this one really is across the ages. So like the name implies. But now we can learn more than just demographics. So that's the whole point of this, is that this is about how people live their lives, how they think. And part of that is those channel preferences, so that we know how do we reach them. For this group, yeah, TV and all things, visual, not so much. Also the radio, audio, snail mail becomes possible. That's 100. So that's the national norm. This is an index. So it means every number that's 100 is on par with every other person in the nation that's not across the ages. So they're above that national average in that they, I should say slightly above with text message marketing, far above, double email marketing and double social media marketing. So for this group, I'm probably going to choose email marketing and social media marketing as my campaigns to reach, if this is my group. And then down here at the bottom, we get a little essay that talks about oh, they laid back lifestyles, they like reading books, going to antique shows. Okay, so now now I can start to create, relevant, messaging that, speaks to this group. So that's this one group in Auburn. If Auburn did tend to be or that zip code in Auburn even specifically, well, then I got this fast track couples that I could start to look at, and then we could just identify, like, where are there commonalities in channel preferences and things like that. Okay, where'd this one come from? Experian, the credit monitoring company. So who knew that they were taking our data and producing market research reports with it? And they are. Here it is. Here's the results of some of that. And then the library is getting it through demographics now. So it's a totally different data set that you and there are other psychographic segmentation models out there. There's Tapestry. Nielsen has one. Like, there's all these different ones, but here's one that's already done for you that you can access for free with your library card. Does this make sense so far? Anybody questions about psychographics or navigating demographics now? Is this helpful? Okay. Well, okay, thanks, Tiffany. It's helpful. All right. So let's flip this on its end for a moment. Let's say, I mean, we started this down this path by selecting CI, like King County and such. But sometimes that's what we want. But other times we're trying to understand, which communities we should be looking at. Like, for our pet supply example, we selected these and then we're searching within there. But we might want to know, like, well, let's back up and try to understand, what are the best resources, or best locations for our product or our service. So for that, this gets a little bit more advanced. But if I scroll, okay, so I went to maps, okay, and it defaulted to the places we've already been talking about that we were using as an example. And then if I scroll up a little bit, kind of hides up there, you get these thematic controls and geometry tools, okay? So I'm going to go up to thematic controls, and then I'm going to choose a variable, okay? So bear with me for a moment. So when I choose variables, now I've got all these different variables I can look at. And if I go to consumer expenditure, current year estimates, average, miscellaneous. Oh, wow, I went too far. Okay. Average. It's entertainment. Entertainment, pets, hobbies, background. Look at all these steps I have to take. Now, average pet food, average pet supply, medicine, average pet services. Okay. Let's do this pet purchase supplies and medicine. That's the most general one. It's going to include costumes. Okay, so look what it's doing. It's now it's heat mapping our spending on pet purchase supplies and medicine. And I can back up to the whole US and start to see where are they spending more. And then I can start to dive in on, like, okay, well, looks like Utah and Colorado are viable options. Missouri and St. Louis. Okay, so now I can dive in there and start to see which specifics are spending more. And then I could go back and I could run my query just like we did, knowing what we learned here, and get those specific numbers. It does give me a scale like this, but it gets confusing of, like, is that dollars? Is that, like, percentage? Like, what is that? What do they mean by that? So I recommend using this to navigate to the geography you want to find, and then going back to the top like we did here, and learning about that specific geography. And I see Gemma's question: how is this data collected? This is part of the consumer expenditure survey. So how much money do people spend on pet purchase supplies and medicine? And so they're the ones asking that question and then rolling it out, and then demographics now is picking it up.
Jay, I wanted to flag that we have 16 more minutes, and
Okay.
I think what could be helpful would be maybe just recap a couple of the resources that people can access after your workshop, but also open up some time for folks to ask some questions here.
You bet. Yeah. So that was a thank you for that. I'd say, just to recap, our favorite tools for market research that are in this list are Data Axle, Demographics Now, and ABI Inform. We didn't do ABI Inform, but that's one we'll do together, in one of those market research reports. I also want to flag Business Insights Global, because that one is a good place for you to go and get like information about large companies. If you're interested in trying to learn about large companies or more industry data about like statistics of that specific industry, that's a good go-to. And then another one on this list, since somebody asked earlier in the presentation about grant searching, Foundation Directory is our grant searching tool, and for nonprofits. There are like very, very, very few for-profit grants in this database, and that's because it's built on the tax records that nonprofits file as a result of that tax exempt status. So it's mostly like, which foundations gave nonprofits money, how much, for what are the topics, all those kind of things. So that's another one that we can help you out with in one of those nonprofit business information appointments. So that's how I would recap those. I'm going to drop back to my share, and then we'll just talk about questions that you might have. Yeah, actually, why don't we just, instead of me going back into my to my presentation mode, I know people probably have questions. So what questions do you have now that you've seen some of these? Or if you have specific kind of scenarios you're like that you want to kind of talk through. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. So all this that you're talking about, this is to get this information through you, or this is to get information by us getting the library card and doing it ourselves?
Both. Start with through me and my colleagues, and we'll get you everything we can in the moment. So we'll spend an hour with you. We'll talk about what you're working on. In that moment, we'll send you reports, send you links to like what we and the things that are most relevant to your needs. But then often afterwards, like Demographics Now, like we were just looking at, it can be helpful to go back to that again and again and know how to do that. So we'll show you how, and you can get back into that. And that's where you need the library card, is the getting back in after you meet with us. Is that
so you're actually offering all of us that service because we don't know how to do it, kind of thing?
Yes, we help you one-on-one with as a service. As part of that, we're going to produce some reports like we just did with Demographics Now. We can make that into a PDF and then send it to you right then. So does that answer your question?
I will say I have the link to do that on the page for this workshop.
Yay!
If you want to book something with Jay and his team, go back to the workshop page and check out the things I have linked there. So I'll be quiet again, but just wanted to mention that it is there.
And Gemma, if none of the times that you see their work for you, or if there aren't enough, if we book them all up and they're they're all full, let me know that. And also like email me at ltb@spl.org, which I just put in the chat, or my jlyman @spl.org. And I'm going to offer you some different times, because we know like sometimes those times that we have out there listed might not work for you. Like I worked with somebody who, like, he wrote back to me and he said, none of those times work. I work at UPS and it's holiday season and I need to meet after 7 o'clock. We figured out a time we could meet. So we'll do the same thing for you.
Okay, this is about the side that we are probably more green in our team, like, you know, the doing the marketing study, and we don't really know much about businesses.
Yeah, that's fine. We work with people at all stages.
Cool.
So Jay, what if you're breaking ground and doing something that isn't at all being done at all now? Because that's what some of these teams are. Some are doing things that are they're doing a new way of doing the same thing or something that's already being done. But what if they're breaking ground on something brand new? How would you help them?
Yeah, that can be tricky because, you know, by definition, like who's written about this? Because it's like this new thing. So there we might look at like, you know, data that points at like how it might have been done before, or you know, or other data that like sort of points at them that describes the problem, you know, or something. So there's different creative ways to get around that, but that is harder, you know, and honestly, like most of the kinds of businesses that we help these days are like, you know, disrupting a market, really thinking about something in a new way. And so we do have, but the tools we have to use are like, you know, tools that have been used in a standard way. But it takes some creativity to do that. I know that's not a like direct answer to your question, but it's, I hope that helps. And sometimes we have to go outside of, like, we talked about some standard databases here, but I will share, like, sometimes I've helped other PreCycle you know, folks as well in the past, and sometimes we're going to like more academic, like Google Scholar or something. We're starting there, you know, where like maybe there's an academic paper that was published on this specific kind of processing manufacturing that we're trying to do, you know, so that can sometimes be a strategy. Another strategy can be finding a trade association, maybe that is in the industry you're disrupting, or trying to like make better by disrupting it. You know, that sometimes those kind of strategies can work out, and we can help you figure out who those players might be. Sometimes they might not have the stuff right on their website, or it's on the website, but it's buried in some like paper that they did or something. And there's some search strategies that, you know, have been successful. Does that help, Heather?
It does. And then another question, follow up. So one of the things that the teams need to figure out is kind of their environmental impact or their social impact. Does your team help direct people to what some of the metrics are for particular industries? So for example, the ESG, or corporate social responsibility, you know, those things like some of the models or stats or metrics that are for that particular sector, how much, you know, energy or water you're displacing if you do your project.
Yeah, I've looked for that kind of thing in the past. Sometimes it's been easier to find than others. Like sometimes what we'll find is a paper that was done by somebody, or an article that was published in some journal, and it really points to, like, you know, it informs us as to what those metrics might be, and then we can go back and look at the bottom of it and see like, okay, what are they citing? Okay, here's the organization that produces those metrics. Then we go out to that web. So we're sort of like chaining backwards to try to figure some of those things out. And that's worked sometimes and doesn't always work. But sometimes starting at like that first research report that I mentioned can give us the names of those players, those industry associations, so that we're not just like Google searching across everything. We can go to that specific you know, industry website that we know is involved in this kind of work, and then just search within that. And then so that can shortcut us and get to a set of things sometimes that is more relevant than the top, you know, 5 pages in the Google results.
So how do you calculate, what kind of databases would tell you what your environmental impact is? For example, let's say I buy a pound of mandarins and they are, they're in the supermarket here in Whatcom County, they are $2 a pound. And then there is another bag that is a bag of 5 pounds, and that 5-pound bags is $5. It's much cheaper to buy the $5 bag than just buy a pound of the loose stuff. But ones the ones that are cheaper come from Florida, and the ones that are more expensive come from California. So how can you justify your environmental impact when the ones that come from Florida are cheaper and the ones that come from California are more expensive? And the ones that come from Florida have a package because they come in a plastic bag where the 5 pounds are there. And the ones that come from California are $2 a pound, but they come loose. So you can actually buy the pound of mandarins without, buying the bag as well. How is that environmental impact calculated?
It's a good question. I don't have an easy answer to that. Tiffany had some input there though too about some things. So, Tiffany, what?
Yeah, I mean, this is part of my day job,
Yeah.
or this is an aspect of it. It's very complex, and I love that you have that nuance already, that it involves not just how a product was grown in a field or made, but also who was involved in making it. How was it transported? How far of a distance was it transported? All these different pieces. What are you going to do with the product at its end of life? It is complex, and to my knowledge, there is no single carbon footprint calculator out there that gets all of that. And it's really good, I think, for all of us to note that this is a question that is going to be in the forefront of our minds. With all of us working on recycling projects, then this is the consumer that we're going after, someone who's asking that question. And what we're seeing in some of the social science literature right now is that even if you don't have the perfect answer, we need to acknowledge the complexity and demonstrate what we're doing for those pieces that we do know. Here's what we know, here's what we are doing to address that complexity. Here is the information so that you can make your informed choice. The people who are making the purchases when they're driven by sustainability, that behavior change that's driven by sustainability, they want some of that information. They don't want to be bombarded with it, and they don't want to feel guilty about the complexity of the issue. But I think it's a mistake for us to try to hide all of that complexity as well. It's a good idea. It's a good business idea for us to make that information available. Sorry, that was really long, but I'm really passionate about it. And there isn't a simple answer. Thanks.
And I believe we have another workshop that's on that topic, but I was just thinking that maybe some of the business databases that Jay has access to, in them, they have some information that some sectors have started to calculate. But I agree with Tiffany, it's not a one answer. Someone's going to need to make their story based on a number of factors and say these are things we still don't know yet.
If I can add one more thing, I'll drop a link into the chat. We just went through as a global community setting out the next decade of action on biodiversity with the biodiversity COP15 that we held in Montreal. And there's a Business for Nature coalition, and they have recommendations. So it might be useful for us to pay attention to how this big global group of businesses is talking about environmental sustainability and dependence on biodiversity. Some of the language that they're using might be useful as we're making our business case. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree entirely. And so maybe the way to approach this is like after you've not necessarily like how do you get to the answer, but once you've started to ask those multiple questions that start to peel off that underlying data question that you're looking for, that all go together to help make that up. Maybe we can help with some of those specifics. And we don't have an answer either, but we can at least, we're another like human and another researcher who can help you brainstorm, where we can look for those kind of data. That's what we do. It's like, how do we figure, we don't know for sure how to get from point A to point B, but we can sure help you figure out, what you help us understand what you're trying to do and what questions you have. We'll help you figure out how to do that in real time. Thanks, Andrew.
And I did have this one final point that I would love for you. If you're types there are real quick, legal, and so just a quick cap of that so folks know kind of to what, high level or detailed level people can get.
Yeah, so is the question, is it the question that Tiffany asks right there? Is that what it is, or what's
It was my own, if you're able to touch on the different levels of consultations, kind of those that are a bit more generic or those that are a bit more hands-on.
Yeah, sorry, I got distracted by the chat questions, and we'll take those too, but yeah, let me go back to that. How do we make an appointment? Let me go share. I'm going to back up to the library's main webpage here. And then you're going to go to Programs and Services, Business and Nonprofit. That's your one-stop shopping. Here's where I can find the databases themselves that the library offers. And then here's where I make the appointments. For the appointments, we've got them broken out into some different types. So there were some questions about legal entity. If you do have questions about, so you want to meet with an attorney of some sort, that's where you find these legal consults. So just click there. Got all the ones coming up. Those are free 30-minute appointments with specialists in those areas of law. If you're a nonprofit or starting a nonprofit, you're going to want information about grant searching. Click on nonprofit information appointment right here. If you're a for-profit kind of a business or going to be a for-profit business, start here, business information appointments, and then find one of the ones that are here. And I'm noticing they're all full at the moment. So what to do, they won't be full for long. There'll be more added here. So I'm going to do a little call out to my colleagues, make sure that they add more, but we're constantly adding to this list with appointments. So, but if this happens, this is where you can email me and my colleagues at l2b@spl.org or jlyman@spl.org. And we will, and I'll make some time with you at a time that works for you. I'll put those back in the chat too, so you've got them. And you can hear my dogs in the background there. So you can see we're popular. But there's more, we add more to that list constantly. So it's not super surprising that they're all booked out at the moment. Yeah, they do. They want the costumes. Does that help, Sydney?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And then it's going back to the question.
And I will point out that it's now 6:34. And so if you were wanting to go ahead and wrap up, now would be a good time. But if people do have burning questions, now's the time to shoot them.
Yeah. Yeah, let me know if there was anything that you asked that I didn't get to. Just unmute yourself and ask out loud.
I guess I just have a pretty quick question. Hopefully it's quick. It seems like the resources that we've gone over today are generally probably more exhaustive for like business to consumer business models rather than trying to obtain information about businesses. Like for instance, I'm realizing that my customer might not be consumers, so I'm just gonna have to figure out kind of alternative methods of reaching those people than I was originally expecting.
It's absolutely true. Like the universe of business information is more centered on business to consumer than B2B. That's not to say that there's nothing. There are things, but the details that are collected about consumers as individuals is far more detailed than businesses or those running businesses, but sometimes we can get to some things that way too. It's not impossible, but you're touching on exactly what you're saying is exactly true.
Jay,
Yeah, that's okay. I think that all the database stuff you showed and like the user personas in particular seems really helpful and just cool.
wanted to point out that B2B potential database, and Jay, please let us know if you have any access to it, so that NAICS codes is present in all kinds of different reports. So Jay, would you know what kind of database with NAICS codes that identify particular sub-industry are available?
Yeah. So like one that we didn't go through, and a good starting place. This one's really surface level when it comes to B2B, but if we go back to business research tools, Data Axle, if we click on Data Axle, I'm gonna give it my library card and PIN number. This gives us access to making lists of companies, and there's 80 million businesses in this database. It is US and Canadian businesses. So that's one, challenge, is that if you're trying to do something international, it can be more, we need to look at some other database. But this is one of the largest directory type databases we can buy. So I'll just show you a quick query. If I go to the advanced search here, I could say, show me business type. So we can say, I would like to see pets. I'm just following through my pet example. Pet hospitals in Alabama. I get 519 results. Click view results, and here they are. So we can sort of start to at least map out what businesses exist for a specific sector or things. What we get about each, are like, if I click on the Alabama ambulatory animal care, some contact information, some lines of business, estimated sales volume, but this is a private company, so that's an estimate, not an actual. How long they've been in business. So there's some things we could get, that way in creating like kind of lists of companies that do something. If I want to go deeper into individual companies, that's where I want to go back to something like ABI Inform or Business Insights Global, where I could go look up that specific company, maybe that one. But the problem is that this one is only the larger, mid-size and larger companies. That's the scope of what's in there. But sometimes is who you're trying to reach. So then there could be some hope that way too. Does that give some clues, Hans?
Yeah, I think so.
There's more
Thank you.
and those industry reports will probably take us further with the B2B as well too. But really depends on your specifics of the specific thing you're working on. Okay, well, I'll stop my share.
I will stop recording.
Okay, thanks.